The Chiefs just lost the Super Bowl. So I was thinking, what actually happened to every Super Bowl losing team the following season since 2000? So here it is. After the New York Giants lost the 2000 Super Bowl, they really struggled the next season. They went from winning 12 games to a 7-9 record, missing the playoffs entirely. Their offense couldn't find its rhythm, and even though the defense was solid, it wasn't enough to push them far. Michael Strahan was a highlight, though, breaking the sack record with 22.5 sacks and earning Defensive Player of the Year. But despite his stellar performance, the team couldn't turn things around. They tried bringing in veterans like Morton Anderson and Kenny Holmes, but nothing clicked. The draft was a bust too, and losing defensive coordinator John Fox to the Carolina Panthers didn't help, especially since he led them to a Super Bowl just 2 years later. Then, the St. Louis Rams, after losing the 2001 Super Bowl, stumbled the following year with a 7-9 record, missing the playoffs for the first time since 1998. They started terribly with 5 straight losses, and injuries were everywhere. Kurt Warner struggled, leading to Mark Bulger taking over and winning 6 straight games he started. But Bulger got hurt too, ending his season early. Marshall Faulk had a tough year, only starting 10 games, but still managed to make the Pro Bowl. Their once great offense, known as the greatest show on turf, couldn't shine like before. They did end on a high note, beating the San Francisco 49ers 31-20, but overall, it was a season of decline. Next up, the Oakland Raiders, after their 2002 Super Bowl loss, completely collapsed. They ended up with a 4-12 record, one of the worst in football that year. Rich Gannon, the MVP from the previous season, got injured and missed most of the year. Marcus Tuiasosopo and Rick Myrer couldn't keep the team afloat, leading to a 5-game losing streak and 7 one-touchdown losses. Tim Brown and Jerry Rice, in their last season together, only scored 4 touchdowns combined. Coach Bill Callahan famously called them the dumbest team in America, and he was fired after the season. They ended up with the 2nd pick in the 2004 draft, marking the beginning of some dark times for the franchise. Then, after losing the 2003 Super Bowl, the Carolina Panthers had a rough follow-up season. They started 1-7 with injuries hitting hard. Steve Smith Sr. was out for most of the year, and the offense struggled. They managed a late surge, but finished 7th and 9th out of the playoffs. Julius Peppers, Mark Fields, and Dan Morgan made the Pro Bowl, showing some individual brilliance, but it wasn't enough. Muhsin Muhammad also had a Pro Bowl season, but the team couldn't overcome their early woes. Their draft picks didn't make much of an impact, and the Super Bowl magic was gone. After losing the 2004 Super Bowl, the Philadelphia Eagles fell apart the next season. They ended with a 6-10 record, missing the playoffs for the first time since 1999. Drama with Terrell Owens and Brian Westbrook's contract issues set a toxic tone, and then injuries hit hard. Donovan McNabb, Brian Westbrook, and a slew of others like Todd Pinkston and Lito Shepherd were out at various points. Even David Akers and Dirk Johnson missed some time. Owens got suspended mid-season, leading to a collapse where they lost 8 of their last 10 games. Mike McMahon tried to keep the offense going, but it was tough. Owens managed 763 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns in just 7 games, while rookie Reggie Brown stepped up with 4 touchdowns post-suspension. Ryan Moats added 3 late-season scores, but it wasn't nearly enough. Jeremiah Trotter and Brian Dawkins made the Pro Bowl, but without a solid pass rush, the Eagles unraveled quickly. I'd genuinely appreciate if you could subscribe. Thanks. Anyways, the losers. After losing the 2005 Super Bowl, the Seattle Seahawks made the playoffs, but couldn't return to the big game. They finished 10-6, clinching the NFC West, but it was a less dominant season. Despite injuries, they managed to win enough games to make it. In the playoffs, they had a nail-biter against the Dallas Cowboys, winning 21-20, becoming the first team since the 1997 Patriots to win a playoff game after a Super Bowl loss. However, their season ended in overtime against the Chicago Bears, losing 27-24. Matt Hasselbeck and Sean Alexander performed well, but they couldn't reclaim their NFC Championship status. Next, after the Chicago Bears lost the 2006 Super Bowl, they had a disastrous follow-up season, finishing 7-9 and out of the playoff. After a promising NFC title run, the offense and defense both faltered. Their sweep of the Green Bay Packers was the only real highlight. Off-season drama with Lance Briggs and Tank Johnson, along with roster changes, didn't help. Losing Thomas Jones hurt their running game, and without Ron Rivera, the defense wasn't as formidable. Rookie Greg Olsen showed promise, but other draft picks didn't contribute much. From NFC champs to an afterthought, the Bears wouldn't have another winning season until 2010. Following their 2007 Super Bowl loss, the New England Patriots still managed 11 wins, but missed the playoffs. Tom Brady tore his ACL in the season opener, leaving Matt Castle, who hadn't started since high school, to take over. Castle led a late 3-game win streak, but they needed other teams to lose to sneak into the postseason. Unfortunately, both Miami and Baltimore won, leaving the Pats out. It was a historic miss, being the first 11-win team to not make the playoffs since the league expanded and the first since 1935 to go from undefeated to missing out. Despite this, Wes Welker and Stephen Gostkowski made the Pro Bowl, with Gostkowski earning All-Pro honors. Then, after losing the 2008 Super Bowl, the Arizona Cardinals actually improved to 10-6 the following year, winning the NFC West again. Kurt Warner and Larry Fitzgerald kept the offense humming, with the defense also boasting Pro Bowlers like Adrian Wilson and Darnell Dockett. They had one of the most memorable playoff games ever, beating the Green Bay Packers 51-45 in overtime, the highest scoring playoff game in history. But their playoff run ended abruptly with a 45-14 loss to the New Orleans Saints, which was Kurt Warner's last game, ending without a single touchdown pass in his final playoff appearance. From back-to-back playoff appearances to a swift end to their Super Bowl dreams, the Cardinals' season was a roller coaster. After losing the 2009 Super Bowl, the Indianapolis Colts still made the playoffs, but couldn't go deep again. They finished 10-6, clinching the AFC South for the 7th time in 8 years. Peyton Manning threw for over 4,000 yards, but it wasn't enough to push them back to the Super Bowl. In the playoffs, they faced the New York Jets in a rematch of the previous AFC Championship. It was a close, defensive game where Adam Vinatieri's 2 clutch field goals gave the Colts a lead. However, the Jets responded with a game-winning kick, defeating the Colts 17-16. This was Peyton Manning's last game as a Colt before missing the next season due to a neck injury, signaling the end of an era for Indianapolis. Then, after losing the 2010 Super Bowl, the Pittsburgh Steelers had a strong 12-4 record, but were quickly ousted in the playoff. Their defense was one of the best, leading the league in points, passing, and total yards allowed. As the 5th seed, they faced the Denver Broncos, who had an 8-8 record in the wild card round. After taking an early lead, the Steelers gave up 20 points before halftime. They tied the game at 23, but in overtime, Demaryius Thomas ran for an 80-yard touchdown on the first play, ending Pittsburgh's season abruptly. It was the first overtime under new rules, but the Steelers never got a chance to respond. From Super Bowl contenders to a one-and-done playoff exit, it was a season of pure heartbreak. Next, after the 2011 Super Bowl loss, the New England Patriots dominated again, finishing 12-4 and clinching the AFC East for the 4th consecutive year. Their offense was explosive, breaking the record for most first downs and ranking 3rd in scoring with 557 points. Tom Brady threw for over 4,800 yards and 34 touchdowns, with Wes Welker catching 118 passes for over 1,300 yards. Stephen Ridley rushed for over 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns. In the divisional round, they crushed the Houston Texans 41-28. However, in the AFC Championship against the Baltimore Ravens, they led at halftime, but were shut out in the second half, losing 28-13. This was Brady's first home playoff loss after leading at halftime. From record-breaking offense to playoff heartbreak, they couldn't finish the job. After losing the 2012 Super Bowl, the San Francisco 49ers fought back to the playoffs with a 12-4 record. They won a frigid game in Green Bay, beating the Packers 23-20 with a last-second field goal. Then, they defeated the Carolina Panthers 23-10 in the divisional round, advancing to their 3rd straight NFC Championship. But facing the Seattle Seahawks, they couldn't hold on to their lead, getting shut out in the 4th quarter and losing 23-17. This marked the end of an era, as they wouldn't have another winning season until 2019. From Super Bowl runner-ups to a heartbreaking playoff exit, their redemption chance slipped away in Seattle. Then, after losing the 2013 Super Bowl, the Denver Broncos still had a stellar regular season, finishing 12-4, sweeping their division. Peyton Manning threw 40 touchdowns. Demaryius Thomas set a franchise record for receiving yards, and C.J. Anderson had a strong second half. With the first-round bye, they seemed set for a deep run. However, against the Indianapolis Colts in the divisional round, they crumbled. Manning was hampered by a quadriceps injury, and the offense never got going, losing 24-13. Postseason, head coach John Fox and the team parted ways, ending his 4-year tenure. From attempting back-to-back Super Bowl appearances to an early playoff exit, the Broncos couldn't reclaim their AFC crown. After losing the 2014 Super Bowl, the Seattle Seahawks had a rocky start to the next season, losing 4 of their first 6 games by blowing fourth quarter leads. However, they rallied late, winning 8 of their last 10 to sneak into the playoffs as the 6th seed. Russell Wilson led the league in passer rating, setting a record with 5 consecutive games over 120. Their defense was still top-notch, ranking first in scoring for the 4th straight year. In the wild card round, they survived a freezing game against the Minnesota Vikings, winning 10-9 after a missed field goal. But in the divisional round, they fell behind early, allowing the Carolina Panthers to take a 31-0 halftime lead. Despite a valiant comeback, they lost 31-24, ending their season. This was Marshawn Lynch's final game before a brief retirement. From back-to-back Super Bowl appearances to a tumultuous playoff journey, the Seahawks dynasty hopes dimmed quickly. Then, after losing the 2015 Super Bowl, the Carolina Panthers had a dramatic fall from grace. After going 15-1 the previous year, they plummeted to a 6-10 record, missing the playoff. They had their worst start since 2012, going 1-5, and never found their footing. Losing star cornerback Josh Norman was a huge blow, and although they drafted new cornerbacks, the secondary struggled. Offensively, despite Kelvin Benjamin's return from injury, Cam Newton and the team couldn't recapture their magic. They became the first team in NFL history to go from 15-1 to missing the playoffs the following season. By week 16, they were out of contention after a 33-16 loss to the Atlanta Falcons. From NFC champions to the bottom of their division, their decline was insane. Next, after the 2016 Super Bowl, the Atlanta Falcons entered their new stadium but couldn't shake off the previous year's collapse. They made the playoffs with a 10-6 record, but their offense lacked its usual spark, and the defense couldn't finish games. They beat the Rams in the wild card round, but then lost to the Eagles 15-10, ending what would be their last winning season and playoff appearance until 2023. That Super Bowl choke seemed to change the team's trajectory. Then, following their 2017 Super Bowl loss, the New England Patriots had a strong comeback season. They started 1-2, but then won 6 straight games to go 7-2. They finished 11-5, securing the 2nd seed in the AFC. Remarkably, none of their losses were to playoff teams. In the playoffs, they dominated the Los Angeles Chargers 41-28, then outlasted the Kansas City Chiefs 37-31 in overtime to reach their 3rd consecutive Super Bowl. In Super Bowl 53, they played a defensive masterpiece, defeating the Los Angeles Rams 13-3. Tom Brady earned his 6th championship, tying the Pittsburgh Steelers for the most Super Bowl wins in history. As of 2025, this was the Patriots' last playoff victories. By week 16, a devastating loss to the 49ers ended their playoff hopes. Jared Goff had some standout performances, earning NFC Offensive Player of the Week in Week 11, and even punter Johnny Hekker taking NFC Special Teams Player of the Week in the season's last game. Despite these individual accolades, the Rams finished 9-7, missing the playoffs for the first time under Sean McVay. It was a bitter pill to swallow after their Super Bowl appearance, marking their last season at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum before moving to SoFi Stadium. Next, after losing the 2019 Super Bowl, the San Francisco 49ers saw their season crumble due to a barrage of injuries. Key players like Jimmy G, George Kittle, Richard Sherman, Deebo Samuel, and Nick Bosa were out for a significant period, leading to a league-high 18 players on injured reserve. Their record tanked after a Week 8 defeat to the Seahawks, and a Week 15 loss to the Cowboys sealed their fate, ending playoff hopes after a 13-3 season the year before. Despite the turmoil, Fred Warner excelled, earning first-team All-Pro honors. They made a big trade, sending DeForest Buckner to the Colts for a first-round pick, but it wasn't enough to salvage the season. The 49ers ended with a 6-10 record, playing their last 3 home games in Arizona due to COVID restrictions. It was a stark contrast from their Super Bowl run. Then, after the Kansas City Chiefs lost the 2020 Super Bowl, they were eager for redemption, but stumbled out of the gate, losing 4 of their first 7 games. However, they turned things around, winning 9 of their final 10 to finish 12-5, securing their 6th consecutive AFC West title and their 4th straight AFC Championship game. Patrick Mahomes was phenomenal, topping the NFL Top 100 list, and Travis Kelce made history, being the highest-ranked tight end at number 5. The playoffs were thrilling. They trounced the Steelers 42-21, then edged out Buffalo in an overtime thriller, 42-36. But moving on, after losing the 2021 Super Bowl, the Cincinnati Bengals had a rocky start, going 0-2, but then surged, winning 12 of their last 14 games for a franchise best 12-4 record. they secured back-to-back AFC North titles for the first time and avoided a coin flip for home field by defeating Baltimore in Week 17. In the playoffs, they beat the Ravens 24-17, highlighted by Sam Hubbard's 98-yard fumble return touchdown. They then dominated the Bills in snowy conditions, 27-10. The AFC Championship was a nail-biter, tied at 20 in the fourth, but a costly penalty on Joseph Ossai gave Kansas City a chance for a game-winning field goal, ending Cincinnati's season with a 23-20 loss. Despite the heartache, they proved their mettle as one of the NFL's elite teams. Following their loss in the 2022 Super Bowl, the Philadelphia Eagles had an explosive start, winning 10 of their first 11 games. However, their season unraveled spectacularly. They lost 5 of their last 6, lost the NFC East to Dallas, and only made the playoffs as the 5th seed. Their defense was abysmal, ranking 26th in the league, allowing over 428 points and getting thoroughly outplayed by playoff teams. Even their victories were tight. In the playoffs, they were overwhelmed by Tampa Bay, losing 32-9 in a game where Baker Mayfield threw for 337 yards against their porous run defense, and they failed to convert a single third down. Postseason, the team made significant changes, firing both coordinators, with legends Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox retiring. It was one of the most dramatic late-season collapses in recent memory. Next, after losing the 2023 Super Bowl, the San Francisco 49ers had a season of turmoil. They began with a decent 5-4 record, but then everything went south. They lost 7 of their last 8 games, missing the playoffs for the first time since 2020. Injuries were a major factor. Christian McCaffrey missed the first 8 games, and later, Brandon Ayuk, Jordan Mason, and Trent Williams were also sidelined. Rookies had to step up, but it wasn't enough. Their defense was in shambles, finishing 29th in points allowed and only managing 2 takeaways post-bye week. With a record dropping to 6-11, their worst since 2020, the team decided to fire defensive coordinator Nick Sorensen. From Super Bowl contenders to a season of collapse, it was a stark fall from grace. But finally, as we all know, the Kansas City Chiefs lost the 2024 Super Bowl. The next season, they'll be back chasing another title, but they've got a lot of work to do. They entered the year trying to make history, aiming to become the first team ever to win 3 straight Super Bowls, but the dream ended in brutal fashion. The Philadelphia Eagles dominated them, exposing every weakness that had been lurking. Now, the Chiefs enter an off-season full of uncertainty, trying to reload for another run while facing major roster challenges. Mahomes is still the guy, and as long as he's leading the way, this team will always have a shot. But even he needs help. And right now, this roster has some serious issues. The biggest concern is the offensive line. Who is Mahomes throwing to? This has been a problem for years, but this time, it really came back to haunt them. Ever since Tyreek Hill left, the Chiefs have been trying to patch together a receiving corps, and it's just not working. Travis Kelce has been the main target, but he's not getting any younger, and his production is starting to dip. He's already facing retirement rumors, and if he walks away, that would leave an even bigger hole. Even if he stays, the Chiefs need to find a reliable number 1 wide receiver. They've been trying to get by with short-term solutions, but they can't keep playing that game. They tried bringing in DeAndre Hopkins mid-season, hoping he'd be that guy, but it didn't work out at all. Hopkins barely played after the trade, so Tennessee still got the draft pick, and the Chiefs got nothing out of it. Now Hopkins is a free agent, and there's no way they're bringing him back. The rest of the wide receiver room is also up in the air. Marquise Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mecole Hardman, and Justin Watson are all free agents, so there's a chance they might not have anyone left from this past season. Some of those guys will probably come back, but they need more than just familiar faces. They need someone who can make plays every single week, not just flashes here and there. Mahomes is too good to keep wasting time with unreliable weapons. The offensive line is also in major trouble. Trey Smith is set to hit free agency, and he's going to get paid. He's been a key piece of their success, but the Chiefs don't have the money to match what other teams will offer. If he leaves, that's another massive hole to fill. They've got to figure out a way to protect Mahomes, or none of this will matter. The offensive line was a disaster in the Super Bowl, and they can't go into another season with the same problems. The Chiefs don't have a ton of cap space to work with, sitting near the bottom 10 in the league. That makes things even tougher. If they want to create more room, the easiest way is to restructure Mahomes' contract, which would give them some flexibility. Another big question is Kelce. If he retires, they gain a ton of cap space. But if he stays, they might ask him to take a pay cut. He's still one of the best tight ends in the game, but he's also 35 years old, and they can't keep paying him like he's in his prime. The defense is in a much better spot. Nick Bolton and Justin Reed have both said they want to stay, which would be huge for keeping things stable on that side of the ball. The Chiefs' defense was actually one of their biggest strengths this past season, which hasn't always been the case, but if they lose key players in free agency, that could change quickly. Then there's the draft. The Chiefs have the 31st pick in the first round, plus picks in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 7th rounds. That's solid, but they'll need to make those picks count. They can't afford to miss, especially when it comes to the offensive line and wide receivers. They might be able to find a young, talented lineman in the first round, but finding a true number one receiver that late is tough. They might have to get creative, whether that means trading up or making a move for a veteran. There's also the possibility of making more trades. The Chiefs are always aggressive when it comes to improving the roster, and if they see an opportunity to bring in a difference maker, they won't hesitate. But that all depends on how much cap space they can create and what they're willing to give up. The bottom line is this: Kansas City is still one of the best teams in the league, and as long as Mahomes is there, they're going to be in the mix. But the road to another Super Bowl isn't going to be easy. The AFC is loaded with contenders, and the Chiefs can't afford to take a step back. They've got some serious holes to fill, and they don't have unlimited resources to do it. The next few months are going to be crucial. They've got to nail their free agency moves, make smart draft picks, and figure out what's happening with Kelsey. If they get it right, they'll be right back in the Super Bowl conversation. If they don't, things could start slipping away. This dynasty isn't over, but it's definitely at a crossroads. They can't afford to waste another year with a weak offensive line and a revolving door at wide receiver. The front office has to make some tough choices, and they've got to get them right. Mahomes can only carry so much on his own. He needs protection, he needs weapons, and he needs a team that can compete at the highest level. This offseason is going to be one of the most important in recent Chiefs history. They've already proven they can reload and keep winning, but this time, it feels different. They've got major decisions to make, and how they handle them will determine if they stay on top or start falling back to the pack. The rest of the league is coming for them, and they can't afford to get complacent. The Chiefs have been the standard in the AFC for years, but staying there is the hard part. They've got a generational quarterback, a brilliant head coach, and a winning culture, but none of that guarantees anything. They have to keep evolving, keep adjusting, and keep making the right moves. The next season starts now, and the pressure is on. If they play their cards right, they'll be back in the Super Bowl mix. If they don't, this could be the beginning of the end for their dominant run. The clock is ticking, and every decision matters. They've got the talent, they've got the experience, but do they have the right pieces to make another run? We're about to find out. If you guys enjoyed this, I'll be posting almost every day during this season and off season. I genuinely appreciate if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.